I'd love to tell you that our journey around the world has gone without a hitch. But that's just not true. The route has taken, shall we say, an unexpected turn. And what's worse is that our problems have only just begun. Our photographer has suffered a fractured collarbone, but even so, he insists on traveling with us. We also have to forget about the car for now, so we take the Trans-Mongolian Railway in order to return to Russia and eventually reach Vladivostok. We had the accident while crossing Siberia through frozen highways, enduring the cold and snow at temperatures as low as 5 degrees Fahrenheit. But this is child's play compared to what was in store for us now. José Luis will guide us around the most remote regions of Siberia, and Dan will enjoy the scene in Seoul before leaving Asia behind. We'll travel to the Kamchatka Peninsula in search of Russia's last remaining indigenous tribes. And we'll visit Alaska in the middle of January. These are the first steps on the American continent. Afterwards, we'll fly to Little Diomede Island, one of the most inhospitable places on Earth. The few who make it here in wintertime are left with a sense of having trod upon the world's farthest reaches. And that's where we're headed. Episode 3, The Icemen. For the first time on our journey around the world, I unpacked the camera to film the Pacific Ocean. The train station marks the end of a journey covering over 5,500 miles from Moscow, and thanks to the railway, Vladivostok's inhabitants feel much closer to the rest of the world. The days of glory this city insists on commemorating have also been left far behind. It almost seems as if the Cold War had never ended here. We've traveled the country from end to end, and I've already recorded a lot of flames burning in honor of the fallen. It occurs to me that perhaps the Russians have been too hard hit by history. After all, they also won the Second World War and stopped Napoleon dead in his tracks. They have survived internal tyrannies and external threats. No other country sacrificed as many souls in the fight against Hitler. But you must admit that Americans are much better at making movies.
En el S-56 sentimos la claustrofobia de navegar en un submarino de la Segunda Guerra Mundial. Y no hay que olvidar que esta ciudad sigue siendo una de las principales bases navales de Rusia en el Pacífico.
Inside the submarine's pressure hull, we discover the place where torpedoes were launched, the sleeping berths and the engine room. Yes, the S-56 is claustrophobic. We must not forget that a submarine is an uncomfortable, cramped space that's armed to the teeth. This museum recalls the warlike conflict the city has experienced. Today, Russia looks out to sea and no longer finds threats. Now its people finally have a chance to develop social habits that are more civilian and more civilized. Vladivostok now tends to its wounds by simply doing the sorts of things everyone in the world likes to do. Have fun, go out, read the newspapers calmly, and finally forget the Cold War. Up until 1992, Vladivostok was considered a closed city even for Russians. But on the country's east coast, there's another place that's even more remote, impenetrable, and isolated. And we're about to explore it. There are no roads, and the sea is starting to freeze over, so this time we'll have to travel by plane. It's the only way to reach the Kamchatka Peninsula.
Quiero presentaros a Abache y Karieski, dos colosos que rodean a la ciudad de Petropavlovsk. Son volcanes en activo que dan a este lugar un aspecto sobrecogedor e inquietante.
No matter where I look, there they are. The volcanoes stand out from any angle. It's impossible to forget this area has some of the most active volcanoes on the planet. For many years, the Kamchatka Peninsula was considered a military zone. And until recently, no foreigner was allowed to enter the region. But here we are now, looking out at the outer edges of Asia on the coasts of Kamchatka, with its sleeping volcanoes, its boats docked on the bay, and the water frozen in the harbour, with no more cruising submarines. Or are there? We can't be sure of that. Petropavlovsk's inhabitants are by force of necessity tough. Apart from their isolation, they're faced with an extreme climate and the threat of earthquakes. And yet those who live in the capital can consider themselves fortunate. It's time for us to rent a Russian car so we can venture into the northern communities. We suddenly realize that we are about to enter a region about the size of Spain that is inhabited by a little over 200,000 people. The inevitable result is a lingering sense of solitude. But in these places, the trip often makes up for that.
En pleno corazón de la península, uno puede darse un baño al aire libre cuando la temperatura roza los 20 grados bajo cero. No puedo, no. Si es que no hay profundidad, no me puedo sumergir.
It's a really strange experience to swim in hot water, while every life form just a few meters away is completely frozen. This is only a problem when you want to switch from one spring to another. Just by filming José Luis, I'm already shivering. Shortly afterwards, some locals arrive.
Камчатка лучше.
Kamchatka.
As if this day weren't already bizarre enough, our Russian friends offer us some vodka and beer to celebrate the encounter.
Здоровья.
I knew it wouldn't be long before Dan decided to join the most surreal party we'd ever experienced. According to an ancient Russian tradition, in order to enjoy the hot springs, you must first swim in the frozen river. And I can assure you, this water is nothing like the water in the hot volcanic springs.
Whoa!
At 4 degrees below zero, the vodka-induced euphoria fades fast. Sometimes I'm glad I'm on the other side of the camera. After driving over 8 hours on the frozen roads, the city of Milkovo offers us a welcome break. And this is a good time to sample pyroski, a typical Russian baked bun stuffed with a meat and berry filling.
Привет.
Привет.
Something to eat.
Да.
This one.
Вытащи.
Спасибо.
Пожалуйста. 40.
Sorak.
These vendors are here year after year. They don't complain. And they don't even charge danger money. After leaving Milkovo, we won't see another town for a while. UNESCO has inscribed Kamchatka's volcanic landscape in the World Heritage List, and it's not difficult to understand why. All over the place, columns of water vapor and volcanic gases emerge, mixing the snow and the fumaroles, the ice and the smoke. The place is somehow hypnotic. It's as if we had managed to sneak into a dream world. The fumaroles are like underground bonfires, and we also found that they have a practical use.
Esto demuestra lo fácil que es cocinar en la tundra de Kamchatka. Solo hace falta parar en una de las fumarolas donde la temperatura es altísima por debajo de la capa de nieve. Así que nosotros nos vamos a comer un huevo frito en este paisaje único de Kamchatka.
It's not entirely advisable to eat an egg that's been fried over volcanic gas emissions. But what am I supposed to do? Camera work is tough and hunger's the best sauce. The road has become an ice rink, and we're travelling with no cell phone coverage through an area where there are barely any vehicles. Every once in a while, the cold forces us to stop and stretch our legs, and this is a real joy when you're faced with a view of Klyuchevskaya, the tallest volcano on the Asian continent.
Estamos llegando a nuestro destino. Las carreteras son de dificilísimo acceso a causa del hielo y de la nieve, pero ese mismo hielo y esa nieve decoran un paisaje único.
We can't help stopping time and again to have a look at the landscape. With each step, Kamchatka seems to reassure us that, yes, it was well worth coming here. We've driven some 370 miles from Petropavlovsk, and now, after travelling past boreal forests and volcanic mountain ranges, we're about to reach one of the last towns on the peninsula. Aso is the most important city for the Avan people, but even here there's still a minority of just 600 natives. And to be honest, we haven't seen a trace of the native culture. Just a few Avan huts here and there, but we're told these huts are used only during the summer in performances for the tourists. That alone indicates to us that the Avan have managed to blend in with the Russian culture. In other words, their identity is diluted. We make one last attempt and turn back towards Anakvai, 15 miles away. At this time of year, there is barely any sunlight here, and we need to make the best of these slow sunrises. Shortly afterward, the village is engulfed in shadows. Everything is covered in snow and ice, and from what I can see, people here use ever more drastic means of transport. Not to mention their method for drying laundry. However, water from the hot springs stops the rivers from freezing, which makes it possible for livestock to survive. In one of the houses, we find a leather workshop and at long last manage to locate the Avens. This is where the women make traditional garments in the same style their ancestors wore. In Kamchatka, most native men are big hunters, and the women are in charge of tanning the leather and using it to make boots and winter coats. Reindeer, bear and fox hides are used as raw material. Months back, when we visited Lapland, we found the same type of huts, the same traditions, the same approach to life at temperatures below 0 degrees. The difference is that there are fewer people in Kamchatka. It's the most godforsaken and isolated population in Asia. But here they are, working unhurriedly. After all, they have 5 long months of winter still ahead of them. Fewer than 25,000 natives are left in Kamchatka today. In the past, they've already proven their ability to endure the climate. Tourism and progress will say whether they are also capable of enduring the future that's in store. It's time to take stock of the situation. We want to visit Alaska's indigenous communities, but in order to get there, we'll have to take a little detour. Dan and I will head for Vladivostok, Seoul, Taipei, and fly from there to Anchorage. Jose Luis has to go back to Ulaanbaatar to make arrangements for the vehicle to be shipped first to Beijing, then on to Seattle. Our photographer will also go to Seattle by plane, and we'll meet up with him again later somewhere in Alaska. Phew. But first things first. Since we have a stopover in the Korean capital, we'll spend a few days away from the extreme climate. We hadn't planned on visiting the city of Seoul, but here we are, at least Dan and I are, carrying 10 bundles of personal baggage and technical equipment. Our plane leaves for Alaska in about a week, and it's the first time since we set off on this trip around the world that we can relax for a while. I don't know who I'm trying to kid. I know I'll end up taking the camera out. For instance, to shoot views of Seoul from the N Tower, while others have coffee overlooking the city. Or the streets of downtown, with its shops full of stuff.
Para ir de compras, lo más aconsejable es acercarse al barrio de Insadong, un laberinto de callejuelas donde se puede encontrar todo tipo de productos coreanos.
I admit Daniel is a lot more adventurous than I am when it comes to sampling local foods. He's bent on trying everything.
No, está bien, está bien. Seúl es, entre otras cosas, un mercado callejero. A pie de calle se puede encontrar una amplia variedad gastronómica, tan amplia que incluye productos como los gusanos de seda. Excuse me, excuse me, excuse me.
Bolo, bolo.
Dice que no. Tienen un aspecto desagradable, pero ya que hemos llegado hasta aquí, vamos a salir de dudas.
It's clear that Seoul is a very special city. From the sidewalk, we can enjoy age-old traditions or take a peek at what the buildings of the future will look like. And for those who are more sensitive and feeling bewildered, it's also possible to get free hugs. Although there are other places where instead you just get kicked.
Yo ya estoy preparado. Ahora vamos a ver si son tan fieros como parecen. Pues parece que sí son, sí son.
At the Kukkiwon Center, they've been practicing Taekwondo for decades. Watching these guys train is like stepping onto the set of a Jackie Chan film. And when your teacher is Seoul's champion, the result is fairly predictable.
Es bueno, ¿eh? Es bueno.
We spent our last night in Seoul walking around its avenues. and the next morning the city is completely transformed.
Dejamos esta ciudad con la estampa nevada habitual de cada invierno en Corea y nos preparamos en nuestra vuelta al mundo para dar el salto a América. Si aquí hace frío, no quiero ni pensar lo que nos encontraremos en Alaska.
And now it's finally time for a change of air. We're about to take our first steps on a new continent. On December the 20th, after crisscrossing Europe and Asia from end to end, we finally make the jump to America. We have a long road ahead of us until we reach the Eskimo communities on Alaska's west coast. For the time being, all we see is a society that lives a decidedly North American lifestyle.
Salimos de la ciudad de Seúl ayer viernes y hemos alcanzado Anchorage el jueves, es decir, antes de ayer, con lo cual quedan 2 días para que sea hoy. Bueno, más allá de los caprichos de los usos horarios, el caso es que nuestra vuelta al mundo ha dado el salto al continente americano y vamos a empezar nuestro recorrido en Alaska, el estado más sorprendente y uno de los más fríos de todo Estados Unidos.
We'll soon understand why. In the city, you have to look at the ground and at the rooftops in case there's a threat from above. Its inhabitants figured out how to endure the tough winters years ago. Americans are skilled at turning adversity into a simple pastime. And that takes us to the ice rink, where the local hockey team is busy training.
Después de haber asistido al entrenamiento, ahora sí queremos ver en acción a los chicos de Alaska y lo hacemos en un partido oficial.
Ice hockey is practiced in more than 30 countries around the world, but here it arouses a very special passion. Today we are definitely Alaska Ace fans. In this sort of place, it's easy to get caught up in the excitement. I have to warn you that when it comes to ice hockey, the match itself often fades into the background. Each year, the main square in Anchorage hosts an ice carving and sculpture competition.
How long it takes to make one of these?
Maybe about 12 hours for this one because of the octopus. It's a little more difficult.
It's going to be a trek.
Exactly. Okay, so carve on this side all
Sometimes, when visitors insist repeatedly, the sculptors, out of sheer frustration, allow them to lend a hand.
Thank you.
Yeah, they're warm and sweaty. I don't think there was anybody from Spain.
The spring weather will be in charge of closing this exhibit, but until then, Anchorage's main square is transformed into a fairy tale land of ice chutes and skating rinks for the entire family. Before leaving, we'd like to get away from the squares and shopping malls. Sometimes it's just nice when there's no one around, and Cook Inlet is a good place to get away from it all. I begin to think there's something addictive and magical about Alaska. There's no doubt we've landed in a special place. It's time to rent another car and travel around the Kenai Peninsula, but driving on these roads can sometimes be a bit
Las
hazardous.
carreteras cada vez están peor.
Some days you just resign yourself to the inevitable.
Este es uno de los típicos pueblos del sur de Alaska. Sus habitantes están acostumbrados a un clima adverso que complica mucho las comunicaciones y hace que sus viviendas con frecuencia tengan que soportar más de 1 metro de nieve en sus tejados.
But after every storm, there's a moment of calm. And that's when Alaska turns into a sort of gigantic white meringue. When we go to bed, we won't know whether the roads will be clear of snow tomorrow. The snow gives us a breather and we head back on the road. Granted, this is not the most direct route to the indigenous communities, but how could we miss taking in the southern Alaskan landscape? We're traveling through an area that's full of glaciers and frozen lakes. Places where we can walk around unhurriedly without a care in the world. We've been in Alaska for less than a week, and we've already enjoyed something akin to a free buffet of places to wander around in. From this point on, the road takes us to some of the most isolated towns in Alaska. If we want to get near the Eskimos, we'll first have to head for the cities further inland. The town of Talkeetna is truly authentic. This is where you'll find the Fairview Inn, the oldest hotel in the state, and the streets that inspired the TV series Northern Exposure. But what we're undoubtedly most impressed by is the character of its inhabitants, who have a reputation as the quirkiest people in the US. And some of them are preparing to participate in a very special race.
Iditarod es la carrera de perros con trineo más importante del mundo. Cada año en Alaska cientos de perros como estos, los huskies, recorren 2000 kilómetros, que es la distancia que separa la ciudad de Anchorage de la pequeña localidad de Nome.
We're going to get a first-hand look at one of their training sessions. Participants look after more than 20 huskies, a breed originally imported from our beloved Kamchatka. This is possibly the purest way of traveling around Alaska today. On board a dog sled, we can experience the thrill of the race, and yes, it's quite a rush. Iditarod was created in homage of a group of huskies that crossed the Bering Strait in 1925 in order to deliver medical supplies to the inhabitants of Nome. No human being has been capable of repeating this feat.
Wow!
Riding the dog sled has been the most fun we've had since we got to Alaska, but there are more thrills where these came from. Talkeetna has become a popular destination for mountaineers from all over the world, because no other town is closer to Mount McKinley, whose summit rises 20,320 feet. One way people try to reach the peak is by practicing ice climbing. We don't have much time here, so Dan agrees to take a quick, intensive course.
Thing is important is the rope. You don't want, these are sharp. You don't want to hit the rope with the tool.
Yeah.
Because you could cut the rope and there's no way to protect you.
I have to?
Guarantee you won't go anywhere. You'll fall all over the place unless you smile.
All right, I will smiling.
This is possibly the most difficult and dangerous way to climb. It also requires the use of special equipment and training that we obviously do not have.
Oh.
They say that in January, McKinley's Peak can reach temperatures as low as 148 degrees below zero. That's enough information for us to consider moving on to Plan B.
Okay, creo que nos vamos a bajar. I think it's over. I cannot reach it any higher. I'm sorry.
Yes, I know. There's not much merit in this. but this is really the only realistic way to approach one of the world's largest nature reserves. There are grey bears, wolves, caribou and elk hiding in these forests, but all we see from here is a seemingly endless expanse of evergreens, with rock and ice beyond. Not a trace of life among the mountains. Nothing. Only the tips of some of the glaciers spreading out over the valleys. Only the vertiginous cliffs. While I record these images, I tremble at the mere thought of getting lost here. Denali, or the Great One, is considered one of the most inhospitable places on Earth. We may be back someday with crampons and ice axes, but for now we're simply relieved to finally head back on the road. After crossing 250 miles of pineland, we arrive at the first major inland city. The mere mention of Fairbanks leaves us cold. But on second thought, it's really nice to wander around its residential streets. When you have a good 24-hour heating system, snow is no longer a problem. This is the main square, and of course, here it is. I was hoping to find some sort of reminder of the city's Russian past. In 1867, the United States bought Alaska for $7.2 million. That's small change when you consider that the price included oil fields. "55 miles from Fairbanks, we discover just how different Alaska and Russia really are. Chena Hot Springs is a sort of spa with thermal springs, like the ones in Kamchatka. Only here they also have a gym and a massage room. There's no need to run around in the snow or drink vodka while swimming in frozen rivers.
Well, you have to go fast now.
Oh,
Warm
yeah.
up, right?
It feels good. It's nice to see the sky when you're doing that, you know? It feels like you're swimming with the clouds, so
That's
it's good.
right. I have to try it.
All right.
It's a lot more comfortable, but also a lot more artificial.
Por $500 la noche el visitante puede disfrutar de una de las 4 habitaciones de hielo de este particular hotel museo. Todo, hasta el más mínimo detalle, está hecho de hielo.
I'm not sure I'd ever get used to a room like this. It certainly doesn't look like the most comfortable hotel in the world, and actually, in some ways, this place is especially uncomfortable. Yes, okay, there aren't many places in the world where you can enjoy an ice museum, but I find the atmosphere at the bar to be a bit, I don't know, cold. It's going to be hard to sleep today, and what's really keeping us up is thinking about our next stop. The cold is no laughing matter there. Far from Fairbanks, José Luis has finally managed to get the car fixed and is travelling from Ulaanbaatar to the city of Seattle. Our photographer had to fly to Anchorage by way of Beijing. After that, he travelled overland to the city of Fairbanks and arrived just in time to join us on the last part of our route through northern Alaska.
La mayor parte de los pueblos de Alaska están incomunicados durante el invierno. Lo más recomendable es viajar en una de estas avionetas.
You could say that, with all due respect to Siberian Huskies, the only way to travel around the state is by plane. Over hundreds of miles, all there is for me to record is a vast expanse of frozen desert. In Alaska, there is one human inhabitant for every square mile of land, or rather, ice. It's just a desolate expanse, once again. No doubt someone's already dreaming about the day we reach the Caribbean. But for now, we'll travel to Nome. From there, we'll take a flight to Wales, and with a bit of luck, we'll manage to travel even further. There are no cars, no roads, no pedestrians.
Okay, vámonos.
And this is the closest thing to a taxi we'll find. It almost feels like the westernmost city in America is a deserted place, like we're all alone here. There's nothing resembling a hotel, but we're given shelter at the school. On what passes for a street, all we find are a handful of children. Their facial features remind me of the natives of Kamchatka. Like them, they're also cut off from the rest of the world half the year and are used to a geography that we find frightening. But that's nothing. Where we're going, the climate is even more extreme.
La única manera de alcanzar Diomedes en inviernos es a través del helicóptero. En este momento están cargando alimentos para los habitantes de la isla y es precisamente a través de este medio de transporte como nosotros vamos a alcanzar también Diomedes.
Just a minute. Look at these images. Even his nose is turning white. A man tries to warn him, but he doesn't even notice he's got the first signs of frostbite. This is just an early warning. That's not the only problem. Siegfried is the only pilot in the area, and he's not exactly what you'd call sociable. But after negotiating for several hours, we managed to book a passage to the farthest reaches of the state of Alaska.
When do you think you're going back to Diamond?
Probably not until next week.
What?
Usually once a week.
Once a week.
It's hard to really grasp where we are. We're crossing over the Bering Strait. This place is so remote that if we go any further, we'll actually be on our way back. The island is... That icy rock is the island? Oh, I can't believe it. We're about to land on Diomed. An area that's isolated by winds from the North Pole, in the middle of nowhere and surrounded by polar bears. What on earth are we doing here? The sheets of ice make it impossible to approach by boat, and there's no runway to land on. Only a small helicopter connects Diomed with the rest of the continent. We don't know when they'll be back for us, but right now we don't care. We did it! We've managed to reach the heart of the Bering Strait in the middle of the month of January. We'll have to sleep at a school again, and eat whatever we're offered on the island. As we look around, all three of us feel our pulse start to race. The silence is broken only by the ravens, crows, and the wind. Diomed, at first glance, is a bit scary.
Dicen en el pueblo que es posible cazar un oso mañana y comérselo hoy. Y eso es literalmente cierto, porque este es precisamente el punto internacional declarado como cambio de fecha. La isla del fondo es la gran isla de Diomedes y pertenece a Rusia. Nosotros vivimos con un día de retraso respecto a ellos. Y en tan solo 3 millas acaba el oeste y empieza el este del planeta.
25,000 years ago, Asia and America were joined by a strip of land at a place now known as Beringia Land Bridge, which was the route that nomads from Kamchatka originally crossed. Several thousand years later, the sea level began to increase until reaching the current level. If we get a little closer still, even closer, we'll see that the Diomed Islands are in the middle of the Bering Strait, a strip of sea about 50 miles long. And only in this precise spot, exactly where we are now, is it possible to walk on ice from the United States to Russia and travel to the future. Weird, huh? There are 140 Eskimos living on the no man's land known as Little Diomed Island. Although they're technically US citizens, they are governed by their own laws, and we need to be careful. If we try to cross over to the Russian island, leave town without an escort, or go anywhere near the cemetery, we'll be arrested or kicked out. We've already been fined $600 just for taking out the camera without asking the Elders' Council. But we didn't come all the way here just to sit around, so we go out and wander around the town's 3 streets. The Eskimos living in the area gave up their traditional igloos for wooden houses with subsidized heating systems many years ago. Wayne Grediagin is considered one of Alaska's best mechanics, and he is familiar with every last town in the state. The island depends on his skill at keeping its heating systems in perfect working order. And I assure you, that's one of the hardest jobs I've ever seen in my life. Like us, he's sleeping at the school in Diomed, and he'll be staying there until the helicopter arrives.
You are here to be sure that the power is going to be on in this village. It means that the subsistence is not anymore in Diomed.
Well, it's not like it used to be. Now, with power like it is, everything runs off of power. Without it, you have no heat in the homes. They don't have seal oil that they use anymore to heat their homes. They have bigger homes. Everything is shipped out here to this island, and with modern conveniences, it requires power to run them. Their stoves don't work. There's no trees to cut, so they can't heat with wood. Yes. This means power has to be here in order to live.
Subsistence lifestyles may be a thing of the past, but even so, we find that some homes are still decorated with whale bones. What none of us had expected to find was the hide off a polar bear's back. It's clear that the hunters on Diomed are still fairly good shots. We try to approach the Eskimos, but the camera makes them distrustful. This community is like a huge family that has, for decades, lived with its back to the rest of the world. The temperature is less than 4 degrees below, and there are 5 hours of daylight to go. No, I'm afraid it won't be easy for us to film Diomed's inhabitants. Well, at least, not most of them. Even so, they've invited us to attend the most important social event on the island. Every Thursday, the young people perform old Eskimo dances. Their drums are made of walrus hides and whale stomachs, and they've been learning the island's old traditional songs since they were little. The day of the dances is something like a discotheque, where young men try to impress the girls. But these girls are not easily impressed. We've chosen to remain on the margins for the time being. Ever since the dance, our situation seems to have improved. Jerry, one of the island's young Eskimos, asks us to dinner.
What we have to eat because we're hungry.
We have one of the bears.
One of the bears. Ribs.
Yeah, bear ribs.
Yes, polar bear ribs. From the same polar bear whose hide we saw earlier, and whose flesh is preserved on the street.
Why don't you leave the island to go to the mainland?
This is where I'm from. So my friends and family are here, and I like to hunt bears, walrus. It's in my blood.
Let's go. Cherry.
I don't think Jose Luis ever expected the day would end with us sharing bear meat with an Eskimo. And although the ribs taste more like fish, this is the first time we all feel comfortable here.
Every year the currents, the ice is just getting worse and worse, and the currents are getting more unpredictable, and the weather is it's nothing like when I was little. A lot of animals are going farther and farther north, they say, because of the water's warming.
Jerry and Jose Luis may well discuss global warming under the shelter of the school building, but outside all we can feel is the local cold.
En invierno no es recomendable estar más de 20 minutos en el exterior. Nos han aconsejado también que para esta grabación tengamos un tiempo limitado y controlemos los síntomas de congelación, así que vamos a darnos prisa para terminar cuanto antes.
As we approach the coast, the temperature feels like it's close to 89 degrees below zero. In just 15 minutes, the fluids on the tripod head will be completely blocked. Soon after, the camera's viewfinder fails. Within a half hour, the lens begins to freeze. We have to shoot in a hurry, but it's hard to do this wearing gloves. Later, our eyelashes frost over and our eyes start sticking shut. Our hands become numb. And once your face starts to lose its color, there's only one thing you can do. Run and find shelter before it's too late. And just when we're so proud of having defied the cold weather, having dared to go outside and endure the polar wind, just then the children appear. And we boast of being brave. Here they are, playing without a care next to the frozen boats and laughing in front of the camera. In every last village on the planet, there's always a child at play. The sun sets every day at 4 in the afternoon. For me, that's great. It means it's time to seek refuge in the school. Here, each of us has his own way of unwinding, and our moods begin to lift. We are gradually starting to get used to Diomed. Even the main square is starting to look to us like any other main square on Earth. The town also has a church, a little town hall, and even a medical center. The seal hunting harpoons will soon become museum pieces. But we're still in time to discover 100% typical Eskimo traditions.
Nos vamos de pesca y lo vamos a hacer al viejo estilo tradicional de los esquimales. Para ello me acompaña Willy, que va bien equipado con un arpón, su redtail y un rifle. Y yo me pregunto, ¿para qué lleva un rifle? Willy, what is this rifle for?
It is to protect us from the mighty polar bear that could kill us and eat us if it wanted to, and if it was hungry enough.
Let's go.
Okay.
Let's go fishing.
Let's go fishing.
Bueno, me vas a proteger con eso. Serás bueno tú, ¿no? Disparando. Are you good shooting?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, menos mal.
Willie told Dan to stay close by his side in case the bear appears. But what about the cameraman? Happens a lot.
Lo primero que hay que hacer es buscar una superficie plana. Y Willy ha decidido que este es el lugar perfecto para empezar a cavar. Let's start.
Okay.
Empezamos.
It takes almost an hour to dig a hole 1 meter deep and reach the water. As you can see, this is hard work. And so is Willie's job. After all, we've all come here to work.
Me pregunto qué clase de peces viven ahí debajo. Qué frío debe hacer.
Now imagine this same scene 50 years ago, when there were no designer boots or snowmobiles or wooden houses with radiators.
10 years ago was a lot more and better hunting.
better seasons, but nowadays, with how much the global warming has affected our planet system, we don't get much ice.
We don't have enough ice. Is that what he said? As incredible as it may seem, everyone here talks about global warming.
No, we all depend on each other. That's why we're still on this island. We've always been dependent on each other, you know. If somebody needs help, we'll go help them. Or if we need help, somebody will come help us, you know.
But do you want your daughters go to the university too?
Yes. That, cause you know, I can't force them to live out here and live the life out here. You know, it's their life, their mind. If my daughter wants to be a doctor, I'll let her be a doctor. If she wants to be a lawyer, that's fine, she'll be a lawyer.
We've tried, but not even the fish want to go near the island. There are also fewer and fewer men left. Not everyone is willing to spend another winter on the Bering Strait. No one really knows what will become of Diomede tomorrow.
How's the future?
The future? I don't think it'll change any. I think it'll still be the same.
So it's hard to say with all that's going on in this world, but finally we're getting new homes and it's a little better.
It's my opinion that in about 5 years, things will be drastically different than what they are today. I'm thinking that very possibly the school may close up. And with the school closing up, then the village slowly closes up until finally it's gone too.
We've spent a week among the Eskimos, trying to understand why they continue to live in this place with no way out, shut in by the winter. And we've learned you must never ask someone why they still live in the place where they were born. The next morning, we witnessed something truly unusual. The temperature has gone up almost 54 degrees. The ice sheets that joined the islands have disappeared, and for the first time, we see the currents of the Bering Sea flow. We've already been warned. Global warming would also reach the end of the world. The helicopter has landed. It's time to leave the island. We're left with a feeling that's hard to describe. Diomede has given us a vision of one of the most remote corners of the planet. We have had a one-of-a-kind experience, and the Eskimos have finally welcomed us into their lives. And that's not bad, after everything.